I don't like you. I'm not going to marry you. And I'm definitely not going away with you. If you keep pushing me, I'll enlist in the army and never come back for the rest of my life. Inside the small thatched house decorated with a big red wedding symbol, 17-year-old Jason stood in the farthest corner from the bed, glaring at me with cold disgust in his eyes, as if I were some filthy thing he couldn't shake off. Boom! It was like a muffled thunderclap exploded in my head. I had been reborn, back to the year when Jason secretly signed up to join the army without telling his family. I had come to this village with my parents while fleeing famine. After they died, Jason's mother took me in. She wasn't in good health and worried that no one would be there to take care of Jason if she passed away early. So, since I was 8 years older than him, I became the child bride of the Parker family. When Jason was little, he was always like a little tail, happily trailing behind me, calling me Sister Emily, over and over again. Once, he saw me playing house with some boys from the village and rushed up to bite one of them, crying that I was his wife and no one else was allowed to pretend to be my groom. I really liked Jason back then. I washed his face and feet for him every day and held him in my arms at night to put him to sleep. That was the time when our relationship was at its best. I always believed that Jason and I would grow from childhood sweethearts into husband and wife, and that we'd spend our lives together in love. But everything changed in middle school. That was when Jason met his white moonlight, Claire Mitchell. Claire's parents were both officials assigned to the commune by the county's cultural committee. She transferred to the commune middle school with them. She was a stylish city girl, well-dressed, with a neat high ponytail, and the moment the first snow fell, she caught the attention of every boy around. Jason fell for Claire at first sight. From then on, he refused to let anyone call me his child bride. Whenever villagers joked that I was the wife his mother raised for him, Jason's face would turn dark and he'd curse back. He even got into fights a few times over it. In my previous life, when I realized Jason had fallen for another girl, I foolishly used every pathetic method I could think of to try to win him back. I copied Claire, loudly reciting political slogans, but Jason would tell me to shut up, saying my accent made my Mandarin sound ridiculous. I sewed myself a skirt like Claire's, took out my braids, and styled my hair in a high ponytail. Jason mocked me, saying that with my natural curls, the ponytail looked like I had a frizzy broom stuck to the back of my head. Ashamed and angry, I ran crying to his mother. I never imagined that her involvement would lead to a complete break between Jason and me. She didn't like Claire, thinking she was proud and arrogant. In her eyes, a girl like Claire, born with wealth and privilege, would never serve others. I, on the other hand, had been raised and trained by her, 8 years older than Jason, honest and hardworking. Surely I could take good care of her son. So, despite Jason's fierce resistance, she arranged 2 tables for a wedding feast and forced Jason and me to be married. In my past life, I naively believed that as long as I became Jason's wife and gave him children, he would eventually see my worth and cut ties with that schoolgirl. I never expected that Jason would rather die than accept me. On the second day after our wedding, he left me and went to enlist in the army with Claire. I became the laughingstock of the entire village. Even Jason's mother blamed me, saying I was useless and couldn't even keep a man. Jason was the only son of the Parker family. After he joined the army, his mother took out all her anger on me. Out of guilt, I stayed and devoted myself to the household, working like a maid for the rest of my life. She cried every day about missing her son, and the guilt in my heart only grew. I threw myself into every task, indoors and out, trying to make up for everything. Meanwhile, Jason used the army's stipend to buy Claire pretty clothes, shoes, and imported makeup, while I wore patched-up rags and worked under the blazing summer sun, desperately trying to earn work points in the fields. Jason and Claire went out for special meals at state-run restaurants, while I saved all the good grain in the house for Jason's mother, living off wild vegetable porridge or sweet potatoes and yams myself. Jason's mother, who had once been as frail as rice seedlings in a cold wind, lived an extra 10 years under my careful care before passing away. After she died, Jason came back for the funeral. He had already become a company commander, tall, straight-backed, and strikingly handsome. Seeing him like that filled me with a mix of sorrow and joy. According to the customs in our hometown, a daughter-in-law, who had served her mother-in-law faithfully for more than a decade, who cared for her until her final days, was not someone the husband could just abandon. I was the only one left in my family. I thought that after the funeral, this time, Jason would finally bring me with him to join the military unit as a soldier's wife. But what I never expected was that the very first thing Jason said to me after the funeral was, "Emily, let's get a divorce." In my previous life, hearing those words drove me into a frenzy. I clung to him, screaming and demanding why. Jason only needed one sentence to shove me straight into despair. "Emily, I don't love you. How can two people with no feelings for each other spend a lifetime together?" He was right. How can two people with no love live a lifetime together? My thoughts returned to the present. I raised my head and looked deeply at Jason one last time. Then I yanked the bright red flower pinned to my chest, threw open the door, and walked up to his mother. "Ma'am, Jason doesn't love me. He doesn't want to be my husband. Maybe we should just call off this engagement." Both Jason and his mother were stunned when they heard I wanted to end it. Jason looked at me with a complicated expression, half relieved, half annoyed. After a moment, he sighed and said, "Emily, I know you're all alone now. If you've got nowhere else to go, you can still stay here. When I leave for school, you and my mom can look after each other." Jason's mother scoffed and snapped angrily. "So I raised her all these years just for her to be your wife, and now she wants out? What's she still doing in this house? Living off us for free?" I lowered my head in embarrassment, fingers twisting the hem of my shirt as tears welled in my eyes. I wanted to tell her I wasn't freeloading. Ever since I was adopted by the Parker family, I'd been afraid they might abandon me. So I always threw myself into housework, afraid of being unwanted. Jason's mother had said it was useless for girls to go to school, so I dropped out after 3rd grade to help her full-time. By the time I was 14 or 15, whether it was working in the fields for labor points, cooking, washing clothes, feeding pigs, or tending chickens, I was the one doing almost everything inside and outside the house. And now, she was calling me a freeloader. When Jason saw me crying, a trace of guilt flashed in his eyes. For once, he stood up for me. "Mom, don't say that about Emily. She's been the one taking care of everything at home." Hearing her son defend me only made Jason's mother angrier. She slammed her hand on the table and yelled, "It's not like we're short on people who can do chores. I wanted a daughter-in-law. If you don't want to marry Emily, then tell me, given our family's situation, who else could you possibly marry?" Faced with her question, Jason looked uncomfortable. "Mom, I already have someone I like. We promised each other we'd enlist together. I'll go into the army, and she'll join the cultural performance troupe." Jason's words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I was completely stunned. So in my past life, it hadn't been me who pushed him away. He and Claire had already planned everything from the start. My head buzzed. I couldn't hear what Jason and his mother were shouting about anymore. By the time I came back to my senses, Jason had already grabbed his suitcase and stormed out. His mother clutched her chest, gasping for breath. But no matter how angry she was, he was still her son. She couldn't bring herself to curse at him. Just like in my previous life, she turned all her fury toward me, yelling that I was worthless, that I'd grown up side by side with Jason as childhood sweethearts, and still couldn't hold on to him. Taking the chance, I looked at her and said, "Ma'am, if you really want Jason to come back, why don't you just marry me off to someone else?" My words left Jason's mother momentarily stunned. Wanting to free myself from the Parker household as soon as possible, I patiently explained, "Ma'am, Jason is the most filial son anyone could ask for. I think the real reason he ran off to enlist without telling you was to avoid me. Jason has a kind heart. He knows I have nowhere else to go, so he wanted me to stay. But he doesn't want to see me. That's why he left by himself. Since it's like this, why don't you help me find someone to marry and send me off? Once I'm gone, you'll be the only one left in the house. With how devoted Jason is, there's no way he'd leave you behind on your own." After living with Jason's mother for decades in my past life, I knew better than anyone how fiercely a widow like her could try to control her only son. The very next day, she brought a matchmaker to the house. The matchmaker asked me if I had any preferences. I glanced at Jason's mother and quietly said it would be best if he lived far away from our village. Jason had joined the army just to get away from me. I figured if I married someone far enough, he wouldn't have to see me anymore. Then maybe he'd be willing to come home. As soon as the words left my mouth, I caught a glimpse of a smile finally appearing on Jason's mother's face. The matchmaker worked quickly. Within 2 days, the engagement was set. The man's name was William Song, a 27-year-old army veteran now assigned by the commune to work as a forest ranger. Since the job required him to live in the mountains year-round, no local girls wanted to marry into that kind of life. So despite being 27, William was still single. He was 27. I was 25. An old bachelor and an old maid. Somehow, it felt like a fitting match. At first, Jason's mother was unhappy about marrying me off. After all, getting a wife these days wasn't cheap. If Jason had married me, it wouldn't have cost a dime. But now that I was marrying someone else, her son would have to pay if he ever wanted a wife. Still, when William offered 80 yuan as a bride price, Jason's mother lit up with joy. For once, she was even generous enough to let me take the old quilts I had sewn myself as part of my dowry to the Song household. And just like that, I married William Song, carrying only 2 worn quilts with me. Jason didn't find out about it until 3 months later, when he received a letter from home. When he learned I'd gotten married, he felt strangely uncomfortable, though he couldn't quite explain why. It was as if something that had always belonged to him had been taken away. In the letter, Jason's mother gleefully told him that she had finally married off the child bride the family had raised. She added that from now on, she'd never force him to marry a girl he didn't like, and hoped he would come home soon. But Jason was right in the middle of building his military career. There was no way he'd come back just because of that. His mother waited 2 whole months before she finally received his reply. Inside the envelope were a few grain coupons and a 50 yuan money order. It was only at that moment that Jason's mother realized it had never been me keeping her son from coming home. It was Jason himself, this ungrateful little bastard, who had chosen his future over his own mother. The next time I saw Jason's mother was outside the commune office. Back when I still lived with the Parkers, I had handled all the daily chores. Fuel, rice, oil, and groceries were all taken care of by me. After I got married, she finally realized how inconvenient life became without her so-called freeloader. Her health had always been poor, and she didn't know how to ride a bicycle. Just walking to the commune had left her gasping for breath. She sat down to rest at the entrance of the office, a basket beside her filled with a few pounds of rice and flour, plus oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar, though no matches or anything like that. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened in surprise. "Emily, you're pregnant?" I smiled at her shyly. 3 months along, I was just thinking of buying some meat here in the commune so William could bring it to you and share the good news. Jason's mother stared at my belly, her eyes full of longing and loss. Of course, according to her original plan, if Jason and I had consummated our marriage, there was even a chance the child I was carrying belonged to Jason. The commune was crowded with people, and William, afraid someone might bump into me, quickly handed me a few grain coupons and some loose change. He told Jason's mother and me to go sit at the state-run restaurant and wait for him. Once we were seated, Jason's mother looked at me with a complicated expression. In a low voice, she asked, "Emily, is William good to you? You're living so far up in the mountains now. I can't even come visit you easily." I nodded, brushing off her insincere concern, and smiled. "William treats me very well. He earns 18 yuan a month as the cemetery caretaker, plus some ration coupons, like salt and soap. He goes out on patrol every day and often brings back some wild game. I've been learning to gather herbs with him too. We can sell them for a little extra food money throughout the year. It's honestly not much worse than farming in the village." When she heard that I wasn't living poorly, and saw that I wasn't wearing those patched-up rags like when I lived with the Parkers, but real, newly tailored jackets and pants, Jason's mother looked even more conflicted. She had assumed that after leaving the Parker family, A girl like me, with no relatives, marrying off into some remote mountain region, would end up half-starved and ragged like some wild thing. But to her surprise, I was doing just fine. In fact, I was living better than ever. She thought about her own situation. Ever since I got married, she could no longer lie around at home resting while sick. She had to go out to the fields and work with the rest of the production team just to earn labor points. For the first time, she realized how much work it took to run a household. 3 meals a day had to be cooked, dirty laundry and bedding had to be washed, chickens and ducks needed to be fed. The production team also required every household to cut and deliver 2 baskets of pigweed daily to the communal pigsty. Without her so-called freeloader, she was exhausted in less than half a year, looking 10 years older. As for me, back when I lived in the Parker household, I had to work in the fields to earn labor points and save money for Jason's education, as well as to buy food for the family. Anything good to eat or wear went to Jason and his mother. I was left gnawing on coarse bran and wild vegetables, so thin I looked like a walking skeleton. The only time I wore a dress in my past life was when I altered one from old scraps, and Jason had ridiculed me for looking like a cheap knockoff of some city girl. But since marrying William Song, he had treated me with such tenderness and care. He felt sorry for how hard my life had been and made me a boiled egg every morning. He even bought me brown sugar and dug up wild angelica root from the mountains to help nourish my body. In less than half a year, I had gained weight, filling out into soft, healthy curves. My once skeletal face had grown plump and radiant. Only now did I realize I wasn't less attractive than Claire Mitchell after all. Once the soul is truly loved, it's as if flesh and spirit begin to flourish wildly. William and I walked Jason's mother back to her home, but to our surprise, we bumped into Jason himself right outside the gate. He had returned home on leave. Ironically, Jason didn't even recognize me at first. It wasn't until his mother nudged him and said, "Jason, this is Emily, the one I told you about. She's married now. That's her husband, William Song." That realization hit him. Seeing me standing there, looking like a delicate flower freshly kissed by rain, the surprise in Jason's eyes gradually turned into regret. "Emily, you've become beautiful. So beautiful I almost didn't recognize you." I smiled graciously and introduced William to him. "Jason, this is William. Back then I misunderstood things because of gossip in the village. I thought I was just a child bride your mother raised for you. Thank goodness you were educated enough to set me straight. Now I've married. This is your brother-in-law. Oh, and come to think of it, you're not that young anymore. Are you back this time to file the paperwork to marry Comrade Claire?" In this lifetime, without me standing in their way, he and Claire Mitchell must have already become a couple, right? Jason's face froze. He gave an awkward smile, but didn't answer my question. As William and I left, he just stood in the doorway, staring blankly after us for a long time. The next time I heard anything about Jason was a year later. Right before the Mid-Autumn Festival, the 3 of us had gone down the mountain for the market fair. As we stood in line at the department store to buy mooncakes, we unexpectedly saw Jason again. He was wearing a faded army uniform, clearly washed so often it had turned pale. He was walking out of the store with a girl, who immediately began shouting at him with a scowl. "You promised that when we got married, you'd buy me a plum blossom wristwatch, a sewing machine, and a bicycle. Don't think you can fool me with these worthless jars and bottles from the store. I'm telling you, Jason, if even one thing's missing, don't bother coming to my house to look for me again," the girl snapped. "Let me tell you, I'm not that dumb child bride your mother raised, willing to marry you for nothing, asking for nothing, just to be your wife." Jason, who had kept his head down and said nothing this whole time, suddenly burst out in anger when he heard my name. "Shut up. Women like you, so shallow and materialistic. How dare you compare yourself to Emily? So what if you don't want to marry me? A woman like you, who only cares about money, I wouldn't want even if you begged me." With that, Jason hurled the hot water bottle in his hand onto the ground, smashing it hard. But when he turned around, he suddenly saw me standing at the department store entrance, holding our oldest son in my arms. Awkwardly, I greeted him. "Hey Jason, you're back? Is this your fiancé?" I didn't dare ask why it wasn't Claire. Jason had loved Claire so deeply. Now he was back in town, talking marriage with another woman. It was obvious. This time around, things between him and Claire must have fallen apart. I had no intention of getting involved in the Parker family's affairs again. But to my surprise, Jason's mother sent someone to ask me to come by the house, to talk to Jason, to persuade him. After all, the Parkers had once raised me, and since she asked me personally, I couldn't bring myself to say no. If the last time we met, her eyes held only frustration and bitterness. This time, when we met again, Jason's mother gripped my hand and looked at my chubby little boy with eyes filled with regret. She truly regretted everything now. If she had known that getting involved with that girl named Claire would not only keep her son from marrying a wife, but also get him kicked out of the army, she would have raised hell back then. She would have forced Jason to consummate the marriage with me, anything to keep him on track. But instead, here they were. Her son had lost his iron rice bowl in the military, lost the child bride raised for free, and after all those years of chaos, ended up with nothing. All of it. She blamed on Jason, that foolish child. With sorrow welling in her heart, Jason's mother gripped my hand and poured out her frustrations to me for a long time. That's when I learned the real reason Jason had returned wasn't for leave or a family visit. He had been discharged from the army. In my past life, because I clung to him so desperately, Jason never dared to return home. He could only pour everything into his career, working harder than anyone to earn recognition. He eventually rose to the rank of battalion commander. And when trouble hit Claire's family, it was because of his position and connections that they were saved. But this time, without me in the way, Jason and Claire had fallen for each other quickly, without obstacles. They plunged into romance. Jason was so caught up in his relationship that he didn't have the drive to achieve anything significant. By the time trouble came for the Mitchell family, he was still just a low-ranking squad leader. Like before, he ran around trying to help the Mitchells. But unlike last time, this Jason didn't have the influence. His efforts didn't rescue Claire's parents. Instead, they drew attention to his own connection to the case. Claire's parents hadn't been saved, but Jason got kicked out of the army first. He felt incredibly guilty for not being able to rescue Claire's parents. He wanted to talk with her about finding another way. But what he didn't expect was that the same Claire who had just been crying sweetly in his arms the day before was now laughing and chatting as she got into the car of a second-generation officer. In that moment, Jason lost all control. He rushed forward, grabbed Claire's hand, and demanded, "Why are you with another man? I've been running around non-stop for your family, spent every penny I saved all these years, and now I've even been discharged from the army. After everything I've done for you, how could you do this?" Claire yanked her hand away from his grip and coldly replied, "Jason, I agreed to be with you, but can you promise me you'll get my parents out of trouble? Can you make me the wife of a general someday? If you can't give me any of that, what right do you have to marry me?" And just like that, Jason returned to his hometown with nothing to his name. Because Jason had been discharged for misconduct, it wasn't considered an honorable discharge. He didn't even get reassigned to a job. His mother had originally hoped that once he came home and got married, she could finally enjoy a comfortable life. But then she found out that Jason had spent every penny of his military savings trying to pull strings for Claire Mitchell. He'd even borrowed several hundred yuan from fellow soldiers. Jason's mother was so furious, she passed out on the spot. After she came to, her health completely collapsed. She urged Jason to marry as soon as possible, someone who could not only look after her, but also take care of him. She contacted several matchmakers, but as soon as people heard that the Parkers couldn't offer even a dime in bride price, let alone a bicycle or sewing machine, they all backed off. Jason's looks were about the only thing going for him, and no rural family could rely on looks alone to live a good life. Eventually, someone showed interest and didn't mind how poor the Parkers were. But Jason complained that the girl wasn't pretty enough. And just like that, he kept turning women down and still hadn't found a wife. Jason's mother felt sorry for her son, who had to toil in the fields for work points every day. She didn't dare lie in bed and play sick anymore. "All the chores I used to do, Cooking, laundry, cleaning, hauling water, chopping firewood, now fell squarely on her shoulders. Whenever she thought about how I used to handle all of that, she couldn't help but scold Jason. If you'd just listened to me and married Emily back then, would our family be in this mess? That girl is obedient and reliable. With her taking care of me, you could have focused on your military career. You might have already gotten promoted. But look at you now. Discharged from the army, and not even assigned a job. The more she thought about it, the more she regretted it. But regret came too late. That day, when William and I were saying our goodbyes, Jason's mother clung tightly to our son and couldn't bear to let go. She kept murmuring, "What a good-looking boy, he should have been my eldest grandson." As we were leaving, I saw Jason standing silently beneath the pomegranate tree in the courtyard, watching me without moving. In that moment, I suddenly remembered my past self. In my previous life, Jason had avoided me for more than 20 years. I, too, had once stood beneath that very same tree, year after year, waiting foolishly, hoping he would come back. Thankfully, in this life, we had both let each other go. William held our son in one arm and took my hand with the other. "Let's go home, honey." I smiled quietly. "Yes, let's go home." Jason's side story, regret. When I saw that man holding Emily's hand, cradling the child she had given him, it felt like I'd been thrown into a vat of boiling oil. The pain seared through every inch of me. I had lost the one girl who had truly loved me. I didn't even have the courage to walk up and ask her to give me another chance, because I knew how deeply I had hurt Emily. Again and again, when the villagers mocked her for being my mother-wife, I hadn't defended her. I had hated her for making me look bad. When she was just beginning to understand love, nervously trying to win my affection, I had mocked her cruelly, laughed at her accent, laughed at how she imitated Claire. Emily should have married someone long ago. But she waited year after year for me to grow up, burning through her youth from 16, 17, all the way to 25, becoming the old maid everyone in the village laughed at. And me? On the night we were supposed to consummate the marriage, I used every harsh word I knew to humiliate her, to tear her down, to make her the village's laughingstock all over again. Then I left with Claire and went off to the army. Naively, I thought Emily would stay behind and continue taking care of my mom like always. After all, she had no parents. Where else could she go? But I'd forgotten, Emily could marry too. And when she had finally had enough disappointment, she didn't want me anymore. I never thought she'd marry someone else so quickly. When I got the letter from home telling me she'd gotten married, I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay on my cold iron frame army cot, wide awake. I remembered how, when I was little, every time it thundered and rained, Emily would hold me tight in her arms. Even though she was trembling herself, she'd still cover my ears with her hands. I used to be obsessed with the soft scent of roses that lingered on Claire Mitchell. But that night... I found myself going crazy, missing the faint scent of soap that lingered on Emily's skin, the smell I hadn't encountered again since leaving my hometown. I started to believe that maybe karma really did exist in this world. I had abandoned Emily, and eventually, Claire Mitchell abandoned me too. But strangely, on the day Claire left me, deep inside my heart, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I was going home. Secretly, I wished that the man Emily had married would treat her terribly. That way, I could righteously step in and convince her to divorce him. Once she came back to the Parker family, I would marry her properly, with all the ceremony she deserved. I practiced that speech in my head countless times, how I would convince Emily to leave her husband. But what I never expected was that her husband had cherished her to the point of transformation. You really can tell, at a glance, whether a woman is living a good life after marriage. Back when Emily lived in our home, her cheekbones were so sharp they seemed to protrude, and she looked 10 years older than she was. But now, her face was full and glowing, her eyes soft and alluring. When she lived with us, she used to walk hunched over, shoulders drawn in. I'd even mocked her for her strange posture. It wasn't until later that I realized it was because my mother was too stingy to buy her proper undergarments during her teenage years. Now, wearing a bra her husband bought for her, she finally walked with her back straight and head held high. Faced with such a happy, radiant Emily, how could I possibly bring myself to ask her to leave that man? After Emily and her husband left, my mother wouldn't stop nagging me, blaming me for not going through with the marriage back then. If I had, we wouldn't be stuck now, having to spend so much money just to find me a wife. I didn't want to stay home anymore. Coincidentally, the county psychiatric hospital was hiring strong male attendants. Not many people applied, so somehow, I got in. When my mother heard I was going to work at the mental hospital, she said I was crazy, and maybe she was right. This time, I really was crazy, because on my first night on duty, I suddenly regained all my memories from my past life. I remembered how, under Claire Mitchell's manipulation, I had helped commit Emily to a psychiatric hospital. I saw how the staff, bribed by Claire, had subjected her to inhumane abuse. I saw them torment her, force her to drink toilet water, crawl on the ground like a dog. I saw her lying half dead on a cold iron frame bed, not given any food for 3 days. Starving and too weak to move, she used her fingers to tear open the dirty cotton blanket, stuffing the filthy stuffing into her mouth just to stay alive. Emily had been starved to death. Slowly, cruelly. And what was I doing at that time? I was shopping in a department store with her murderer, Claire Mitchell, buying her expensive imported cosmetics. The next day, like a madman, I burst out of the hospital and ran to the provincial government office. I went straight to the authorities and exposed everything. Claire's parents' years of corruption and crimes, Claire's illegal activities to falsify testimony, and fabricate evidence to try to rescue them. I knew I'd be sentenced too for my role in all of it. But I didn't care. As long as I could avenge Emily, I was willing to pay any price. In this life, Claire Mitchell, your blood must pay for the blood you spilled. Because of the crucial evidence I provided, Claire's parents were quickly sentenced to death. Both Claire and I were convicted for perjury and obstruction of justice. We were sentenced to 3 years in prison. On the day the sentence was handed down, Claire went completely hysterical. She screamed at me, "Why are you doing this to me?" And I wanted to ask her too. In our past life, Emily never posed any threat to you. So why did you have to destroy her like that? But there was no point asking anymore. In this life, I will never take my eyes off Claire Mitchell. Every torment she inflicted on Emily in our past life, I will make sure she